Welcome to another great episode of Talk to Tatiana. And today I'm excited to have Logan Rae with me.
Thank
Logan,
you.
welcome to the
Thank
show.
you for having me.
It's my pleasure. And the reason you're on the show is I wanted you to talk about the thing that people don't really talk about much, and that's failure in business. I think that we as accountants see a lot of them, but other people get this perception that being a business owner, being an entrepreneur is actually a perfect journey. There's no challenges, there's maybe no failures, or maybe people know that there are failures, but it's not going to happen to them. So I wanted to create a series of interviews where people talk about how they failed in business and what they've learned from that and kind of how they move forward. So tell us a little bit about how you failed in
All
business
right.
before.
I don't think I ever took the steps to be like, I'm going to be an entrepreneur and created a business plan and then executed it. All the businesses that I've been a part of have kind of been spontaneous, like the Big Bang Theory. And I think part of that also can be considered what contributed to our initial failure. Um, I started a company. It was called Bacon Boxes in 2015 with one of my girlfriends, and we hit success pretty fast. And then I don't know. I mean, I think the biggest thing that made it unsustainable was not taking like mentors' advice. We got into all these programs. We got into like FAU Tech Runway. We were SCORE American Business Champions, which I think they pick one from every state, and they fly us all out to Texas and celebrate and give us like trainings and advice and teachings and stuff that can make our business better. And I think through a lot of that, we didn't follow. We didn't follow the advice. We didn't take the money when we should have. One of the things too is outsourcing. A lot of known business owners are really big fans of trying to fix your process. Like don't work harder, work smarter. And we were so resistant to that because we felt we had something that was special, nobody else could figure out. I mean, even to bring our product to market, they were bacon roses, they were handcrafted. It was kind of like the edible arrangements, but of bacon. But to get the licensure it took to ship state to state and the USDA approval, it required like 40 pages of HACCP planning. And at the time, I was a student at FAU studying neuroscience. So my background in chemistry came in handy in biology. So we were really like overprotective. And I think that ultimately we held ourselves back from a lot of really big opportunities because we were resistant to opening up and allowing someone else to help us in the areas that we could have really used help in now looking back.
Um, that's really cool. I love bacon. I happen to love bacon. It was a love that actually I developed over the years. I actually didn't like American style bacon. I grew up in a different country and we had bacon, but it was very different than what it is here. But I actually learned to love bacon in the past probably 4 years, which is which is really insane. But now I love bacon. So I would have loved to see what you've done with that business when you did start it. So it's actually a really cool idea. And could you talk a little bit more about kind of the obstacles of what you've encountered, and how did you realize, first of all, and that's a question that people may be asking or not even thinking about, when you started that business, how did you find out that you need to get FDA approval for this stuff?
So yeah, that's the crazy part. It wasn't FDA, it was USDA. So they're different bodies. The FDA kept telling us that they wanted nothing to do with us because that's where we went first, and then we finally figured it out as time went on. But the idea kind of stemmed from I at the time I was engaged to get married, and my fiance had everything. Like this was a man you could not get a gift for because he would buy anything that he wanted when he wanted, and trying to pre-plan something. And he was very simple too, so it wasn't like anything extravagant. So I made him a bacon bouquet, thinking it was funny. He owned a call center at the time. I dropped it off at the call center, and all the women there remembered and went kind of like crazy over it. And then I started getting Facebook messages towards Valentine's Day because his birthday's in January. So towards Valentine's Day, and I was reading the messages, and they asked questions that kind of immediately I was like, oh, this could be a business. They're asking me where I got it and how much I paid for it, not how did I do it and if I would make them one. It was, they thought it was a store bought product or something that was outside of me. So I was like, oh, okay, maybe I have something here. And I kind of just told them, I was like, oh, I'll make you one for, this price. And it was super low. If you get like one of your girlfriends or your sisters or somebody else to also order one, just to make it worth my time. And in 2 days, I think I grossed almost 5 grand. And Valentine's Day is also right at the time of midterms. So yeah, it was not a good time. We were struggling a little bit there. But that's when I brought Kim on. And then it was just me and Kim, and we tried to make all the decisions ourselves. But I had no prior business experience. I had never seen a business plan before. We invested some tax returns that we both had basically saved from the years prior. And it wasn't something that was like well thought out or well developed. So when we did have the opportunity of attraction, it was like silly of us to like turn it away the way that we did.
Wow. And talk a little bit about the partnering, kind of the thought process there, because in my book I write about there was a chapter on sort of it was supposed to be called Partnerships Never Work, but that was more of a partnering with somebody else to run the business, not kind of partnering with an investor. There's also a chapter on investors. So I'm curious to get your take on, you said you turned down opportunities, of partnering up with an investor and stuff like that, which is fine. But I would love for you to kind of explain what the thought process was and what you were afraid of, and what was the reverse thought process when you um, kind of found that it could have been done better or
Yeah.
differently.
So right when we started was kind of when Instagram was really taking off and Facebook was really taking off. So the second that we had the product concept idea. I was making them. She had come by the house because she would drop by. She was working as a bartender, so she would come before her shift and hang out with me. I was a young mom. I had a 2-year-old at the time that we like started the idea. And she was just like, oh, wow, these are cool. like, how can I help type of thing. She wanted to get out of bartending. She was like, this would be a way eventually. And, we were both looking for something that was like fulfilling and fun. Me, it was just being a little bit over ambitious. I was actually studying and hoping to go to med school at the time. So it was kind of like not it was like counterproductive to what I was trying to accomplish, but I stayed in school. I finished my degree. It just was like hard in that process too. But we also use a lot of the school resources. I tapped into a lot of the marketing courses and the entrepreneur groups, and they have this program called FAU Tech Runway, so Florida Atlantic University, and then it's called Tech Runway. It's a separate organization, but it's run on the same campus. It connects you with a team of mentors that have proven businesses basically in somewhat similar industries where they're able to help you. One of my mentors was somebody who helped the creation of Celsius, which is now a national brand, and she was incredible. But a lot of the times too, we were trying to listen to 5 other people's advice on top of our own, and one person saying like protect your castle, don't let anyone inside, and the other one saying take the money, you'll grow, have a small piece of something that's going to be a lot bigger than you. And we kind of just ran until we were somewhat burnt out. And then in the process, I got married. The marriage didn't work out during the divorce. It just kind of, a lot of things fell at that point in time. But the partnership was great. Like her name was Kim. We're still friends. Like it did put us through challenges. There were a lot of nights where we had orders and both of us are just like, bawling our eyes out on the kitchen floor, exhausted because we're trying to do this in between doing other things that support our lifestyles, like being a mom, going to school, her working another job to make sure that it stays sustainable until she's able to take a salary. And just all these different things that were going on, and us like not wanting to turn away business, but having like a product that one is sensitive to temperature and conditions. So it has to be made at a certain point in time, and if you miss that deadline, you're out of luck. You're not going to get it. We had almost no storage supply. The first kitchen that we started in, you couldn't open the oven and the fridge at the same time. And it was shared. So like we had a very small space. It took us 10 days to make the bacon. We also like, we're going to make it ourselves. We're going to cure it, smoke it, slice it. We're only sourcing from family-owned farms. It's a quality pig that's not being abused, because pig farming is one of the most horrendous things if you've ever explored in that area, the standard is very, very low for how they treat those animals. So we were like, we didn't want to add to the problem. We wanted, but we didn't, we couldn't really solve it either. But the best thing that you could do is source from places that have um, additional certifications and somebody, like a big brother watching to make sure that they're following regulations in a different fashion than just mass production. So it was like a higher quality product. It did taste different. It did add to our value, is the reason why, the business was successful. And then we got so stuck on that rather than trying to figure out, okay, who can replicate what we're doing at a higher rate and get the product out so that we can take our hands out of the hard part that's burning us out. And we weren't quite ready to make that jump when it was time to make the jump. And then we wanted to fund it ourselves, and the funding wasn't there because we had a limiting reagent. Like, going and building a kitchen cost hundreds of thousands of dollars that we didn't have at the time. And renting a kitchen was a lot more cost effective, but trying to find a commissary that's available during the times that you need it, that, is going to have storage space and allow you to smoke bacon outside and have a grease trap that the USDA agrees with and all that good stuff, impossible to find. Like, we're lucky we found the one that we did. It was actually located inside of a Alcoholics Anonymous clubhouse at one point. So they had this huge built out kitchen that they weren't really using for anything other than Meals on Wheels. So it was us and Meals on Wheels using their space. And it was originally like a property that was donated to, give back to the community. So it was cool. We were able to like support that in a sense. But yeah, no, it was like a crazy, crazy come up. And really, like, when we got investor opportunities and partners that wanted to come on and also build sweat equity, we probably should have taken it. And then looking back now, we'd still have like a lower piece, but it would probably be functioning and okay.
Thanks so much for sharing that. That was a fun story. I mean, not fun to to have a failing business, but it's definitely a lot of lessons learned, and people who are listening would really have to consider all of these things before starting anything. My question for you is this: if someone is listening and they're thinking of starting a business, they have a really good business idea. What would you suggest, or what would you advise in terms of a couple of things? And I would love for you to address them separately. Number one is partnering up with somebody else. Number two is investors. Do you need investors? Should you take investors? What kind of questions or maybe things that you would need to run by your own brain before you do it? Like, what are the factors that would surround you saying a yes or saying a no to an investor? Same thing with partners, kind of lessons learned. What would you have done differently? And three was mentors, because you've mentioned, the reason I'm asking this is you've mentioned that there were a lot of people who were your advisors. And so you kind of almost, it felt like you were torn. And so I'm curious to know kind of, if you could go back and do it over, what would you do differently? And what's the advice that you can give someone who's maybe starting something, maybe not similar, but something else that they're going through the same pain points as you have gone through already?
So, what I'm thinking, or at least what's helped me in my business following that, is kind of taking it a little bit slower instead of rushing into partnerships. If you treat it like a relationship and you like kind of, it's like dating. Like, you want to get to know the person before you get married. Being in a partnership, you're married. Like, even, in any sense of the world, you're stuck with that person, and there's contractual obligations, but going through the messiness that comes down to that, you want to make sure it's with somebody who has like-mindedness. Same thing when you're picking mentors. You want to surround yourself with people that aren't going to give you necessarily conflicting views, but not ones that agree with you either. Like, you want ones that are going to do what's best for the organization and for the initial vision. You don't want, I get distracted a lot. So having my core team being able to like ground me and be like, okay, but like, what is the goal? What are you trying to accomplish? There's a lot of like things that get in the way, or new occurrences that happen, or things that come up, opportunities. But what are you trying to accomplish at the end of the day? And does what what you want to take your time into or your money into align with that goal? And that helps you make a lot better decisions. It's hard to find mentors though that want to do it out of the kindness of their heart. Usually there's something in there that's benefiting them as well. So figuring out whether or not that mentorship's good, it just depends. Like, I have ones that I pay for, business coaches that I pay for to give me specific insights. And then I have other ones that are provided by the university that, I try to rely on, but then you have a different relationship with that one versus one that you're paying for. And then the last part about investors too. So investors can be great, but again, it's about managing expectations in the relationship and whether or not your company actually needs the money. I've really struggled. I think that's the one thing in business is with financial, not financial management, but like planning. Like so many hypotheticals come up, and you're not sure, is it better to invest in building a bigger team right now? Is it better to invest in specialized equipment? Is it better to invest in software that's going to solve your problem versus just an overall grab, thinking that you know what you need and then spending in areas that you don't actually need? So I think mapping that out, kind of like, again, like vetting really closely what it is that you need, and then going for it in that direction. Then you can bring on an investor that might have experience in something that you don't have experience in, and then be like a good person. Usually somebody that's putting their money into something, they want to see a return. That's the point of it. The only time that you don't want to, it would be a bad investment when it's like the what ifs are too big. So you still want to have some risk management. You want to make sure that they're, invested more than just financially, in my opinion. Like a financial investment's great, but a silent investor is also not the greatest either, because then you're using their money to make decisions and you might need support in that area. So I don't know. I mean, in my views, I prefer to have somebody who's active and willing to give opinions, but not dictation either. Like it's more of like experience. Like here's my experience with it. Here's what I'm trusting you to do, and then you guys make the best decision together.
That's great. Thanks so much for sharing that. I mean, you're preaching to the choir when you talked about the financial management. That's, my first profession. I don't know if you've looked me up or not, but my first profession is an accountant. And so I preach financial literacy, financial attention to a business's financials and forecasting and projecting as much as possible so that you can avoid the pitfalls, but and running out of cash, which is one of the top reasons for businesses failing. But thank you for sharing that. It was really great. And could you talk a little bit about the financial side? How did you find that? Meaning, as you started and you were forced to deal with the financial stuff, with the numbers, with the books, with the taxes, and all of those things. What was that like? How did you feel? How did you struggle with it? Was it easy for you? What kind of surprises you've learned, if you have,
I'm the worst person for that
or whatever?
question. It's so funny. I'm like, it's like the worst but the best. So when it's other people's numbers or things, because like right now I own a marketing agency, so a lot of our stuff is projection and then being able to like know how something's going to perform because they're looking for the right numbers for their CPL, but also for their CPA. So lots of projections, lots of what ifs, and that I'm comfortable in. But then when I'm planning a business that's not, especially one that's not been done before, that you don't have a foundation in, like that was the scary part. Like I was really intimidated by coming up with projections for a company that there was nothing to like there was nothing else that was working in its model. Like I kept trying to compare to like edible arrangements, for example, but they have so many localized franchises that that's not the model that Bacon Boxes was. So it's hard to pull any numbers or any historical data. Whereas me, like I like analytics. I like to be able to like look at the past data and then compare the weather for the future. It's hard to do that when you have so many what ifs, or you have again, just things that are unpredictable. Now I hate to admit this too, but I do a lot of like don't look. And that's not the right thing. And then I try to employ somebody to look for me and then like guide me in the right ways. But staying modest, making sure too that your business is cash flow positive, so money comes in and then work is delivered, and then making sure that those expectations are realistic, because that also can get you in a bind too if you're making promises and then not able to keep them. It ends up costing you more money in the long run. I haven't personally like had that experience, but I've seen a lot of businesses go through stuff like that, and it end up costing their business tremendously. And sometimes too, it's outside of their control. Like we work with like window and door companies with this COVID thing. It's like the windows are still on back order because they come from overseas, and trying to get them produced. You have somebody that you signed a contract with, but their payments don't start until X number of time out from them receiving the windows installed, and you're expecting it to happen like now, and you can't because you don't physically have them. You're on this like little timer. Your projections get messed up. Then all you have is a PO, but a PO that they can pull out on at any time, and how like there's no stability. So for me, it's like scary. That's just an example. I like to keep my investments in my businesses cash flow positive, where money comes in, and I know that I'm able to deliver the work before, but it also doesn't keep you with an inventory or with any type of overhead. So I think that's kind of why I drifted into what I drifted into versus having another product company.
That's awesome. I keep telling my husband that he's an engineer, so he has a very engineering mind. Um, he always wants to come up with some new thing, and I'm like, it's really hard to make money in a product business. Really hard. Like I've seen very few businesses in my career of 17 years, almost 18, that product businesses are making huge amounts of money. Service, SaaS, whatever is probably a better way. I mean, we do need products, so there are ways to do it, but I think it's a much harder business, to be honest with
It
you.
definitely is. It definitely is not, especially too stuff that's on its mind. I don't think I'd ever go into another business too where there's like a shelf life to the product that you're, producing. And then there's so many variables. It's like, yeah, every day is somebody's birthday, so you have the opportunity for a sale, but it's far and few in between too for consistency. It's not like a recurring product. You end up with, potential waste. We didn't have that problem because we were always sold out. Sometimes months in advance we were sold out. And we did this thing too where we were selling originally 12 roses was like $69. Then we raised it to 120 and didn't defer people. Then we raised it because every time we were sold out, we'd get like hate mail. Like people would be angry that we were sold out. So we're just like, we're gonna just make the prices so astronomical to stop buying them. Then all of a sudden we made the prices like, 360 and people were still buying 12 roses for 300.
Wow,
It was
that's
no, it
really
was like
cool.
it's insane. It was literally insane. So again, it's a unique problem to have though. So when you're going into a business, you can't expect that. That's not something that like, we foresaw happening or even being a possibility. If not, we might have made different decisions too on taking the investment. If we would have known that it was like that solid, all we saw was we're going to take somebody's money. It's putting us further away from being able to pay our bills potentially. And then now we have somebody else to get a third mouth to feed. So
Wow. That's really cool. I would totally buy the bacon basket for sure. Okay, Logan. So thanks so much for being a guest. But before we disconnect, before we wrap this up, talk a little bit about what you do now in your business and how do you help people? How do you transform their businesses or lives or both?
So I own a marketing agency. It's called Argon Agency. We started in the middle of COVID. It just, again, was one of those things that happened accidentally and has been running ever since. Um, we are full service. We start off with like CMO support. So like our biggest service is kind of like learning your business and then finding ways that we can help and assist in the flow of production, whether it be from your customer service team all the way to your digital, presence. We do some fulfillment, website, social media, search engine optimization. We do some connecting with other vendors. So if you need, merchandising or prototypes or t-shirts, pens, promo items, that kind of thing. Like we're, again, full service on that front, even though we don't produce them ourselves, we're able to still connect. I think our strongest suit is helping with strategy and then fulfillment after at that point. Yeah, so that's pretty much what we're doing now. A lot of our clients stick with us because we tend to be transparent and upfront and really we tell them the things that they don't necessarily want to hear, but that they need to hear sometimes to make their decisions.
That's awesome. And so, how do you help people? What do you help them transform from where they've started to where they are now after working with you? What does that transformation look like for
So
those
it really depends. I
businesses?
mean, one of the clients that first started with us, she was a midwife. She was in a single practice. It was just her. She wants to retire at some point soon. She's, older and has been in her career for several years. Now she has four midwives working under her, and she's able to take, just the birds that she wants to attend and work a little bit more concierge with clients. And then the rest of her business is still functional. The rest of her brand that she's worked so hard to build is still functional. But at first it was just her plus one. Now it's her plus, I think, seven total. Because there's also a lactation consultant. There's the doulas. There's the support staff, the MAs, etc. So that was a really really good growth point. And they exclusively do like home births and water births. Then we have other clients like the windows and door company where we started out at one point with them, and we have several window and door companies that we work with. But there's been a common theme in there where they usually have like an ads manager that doesn't really really understand the market or how to get it out there, and then all of a sudden somebody who's looking for like kitchen cabinet doorknobs is running through their search budget because they're getting all the ads for home improvement for windows and doors that they don't want. So there's a big difference in finding a doorknob versus finding a window. So, helping them clean that out, helping them lower their cost per acquisition. Sometimes it's coaching their sales teams too, listening to the calls and being like, hey, you should have said this instead of that, or let's try this and trying to help them close the deals or clean up a mess too. Like sometimes the expectations not managed properly, so cleaning that up in a way that like makes the client feel comfortable and stay on board and keeps the integrity of the business. It's all about kind of putting our heads together, not panicking, and then making the right decisions that help everyone, not just them. So
Wow, that's really cool. Awesome. And so, could you please also mention, and of course, all of the links and stuff will be, and including the links on the bacon bouquets, will be listed in the show notes. But could you mention where people can find and connect with you to learn more about what you do, or maybe to engage you in
sure.
the
So
in your business?
our website is Argon Agency, ARGON agency.com, Argon like the gas and periodic tape. And then same thing with our social media on Facebook, Instagram. We're on all the platforms. My personal one is probably the best to look as far as like portfolio samples, and you can find me on Instagram as that marketing bitch. It is what it is. But yeah, and then if you want to reach out by phone, it's 561-867-0027. And if you call in, you most likely won't get me first, but we have a really awesome staff, and everyone here is willing and able to help.
Terrific. Logan, thanks so much for being a great guest. I've learned quite a few things. I didn't know that there's such thing as a bacon bouquets, but now I do. And hopefully maybe one day it will happen again. And someone will come up with that, and maybe we can order that again. And I agree. I think that the prices, the fact that the price, people were willing to pay a much higher price means something. It also shows you how most business owners undercharge for their product or service. And so I think it's really important to remember. So thanks again for being a great guest. And for those of you listening, we're going to have a few of these interviews coming out on this podcast. So stay tuned. And Logan, thanks so much again for being a guest.